Hello, everyone. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon from based on wherever you're logging in from. Welcome to this webinar about the overview of Google Analytics 4 user interface. And we will also do a sneak peek or a short preview or a demo of the actual reporting overview within Google Analytics 4 as well. So firstly, to introduce myself, this is Nidal here. I'm a strategist team lead with InfoTrust based out of our Dubai office. I mostly work with our CPG and D2C brands at InfoTrust, mostly working on digital analytics, tagging, implementation, strategy, as well as I've had prior experience working in data visualization as well. To tell you a bit about InfoTrust, we are a privacy-centric digital analytics solutions company that empowers marketers to make confident data-driven decisions. We are spread out globally in some of these locations. As you can see, I'm signing in from Dubai. We do have our headquarters in Cincinnati. And we recently also set up shop in Philippines, in Cebu City. These are some of the brands that we work with and some of our partners. To walk you through the agenda for today's session, firstly, we will be going through some of the landscape changes, basically the background where GA4 came into the picture and why it became more of a pressing need with some of the features and some of the ways in which it's addressing some of the landscape changes, right? Then we will look into the primary shift in the data collection model in GA4 itself, which is centered around events and users as compared to sessions in Universal Analytics. Then we will look at what are some of the definitions such as dimensions, metrics, what are the shifts and changes in some of the metrics as compared to Universal Analytics. For example, if some of you may have started going through GA4, you may notice new metrics such as engagement rate. So we will talk about what metrics have changed, what are the changes, are you supposed to compare certain metrics across Universal and GA4, etc. Then we will look into the reporting aspect of GA4 and the high-level overview of what the user interface looks like, which are the different sections you need to navigate, and for what purposes you could go into different sections. We will also shortly cover exploration reports, which is one of the biggest or the game-changing features in GA4, which is a drag and drop interface for reporting where you can choose the metrics and dimensions of your preference and then try to sort of put together reports with different templates already available that can be reused. So that's going to be the high level flow of this. I think there was an issue with screen sharing. Can you please confirm that you're able to see the agenda slide now? Okay, yeah. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. So this is the high-level agenda as we talked about the data model, the dimensions metrics, comparison of GA4 versus UA, reporting, exploration, and then the demo will be sort of interspersed throughout the session. So wherever we cover a relevant topic, we would move back and forth between the UI just to show you where certain features or certain options for accessing certain reports, etc., will be on the GA4 side. And lastly, we will take questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A tab. It will be easier to monitor questions in the Q&A tab. So if you could drop your questions there, we would try to address as many of your questions as we can at the end of the session. So let's first look at what are some of the major digital analytics landscape changes. Firstly, we all know that consumer preferences are changing. More consumers are, they rely more on, for example, how their data is being collected, the importance of consent in data collection, and basically businesses having to build more trust in order to gain good relationship and rapport with consumers. So that's more a shift towards being more purposeful about every communication that you have with your consumers, etc. Regulatory environments are changing. There are multiple data protection authority rulings recently. Some of you may have seen those updates. There are new regulations being imposed in different parts of the world. US has been at the forefront, Europe as well, for example, with GDPR, CCPA, and you see that slowly coming up in new regions as well. So multiple states in the US have different types of legislations, and across the world, different countries are also coming up, or different regions are also coming up with their own sort of regulations. And in terms of like technology as well, there is a huge paradigm shift to be driven more towards a first-party data architecture. Most of you may be already aware about the third-party cookie deprecation plan that was announced by Google for Chrome browsers, and that's also expected to happen by 2024. So these are some of the changes, and we can see that with these changes, Google is also trying to, as we mentioned, there is a change within Chrome about deprecating third-party cookies. Within analytics as well, Google is making it more privacy-centric. So there are three avenues where you can primarily see some of these changes happening. First is with the data collection, collecting and enriching the first-party data in a more flexible way. We will talk a bit more about the user plus event data model, which is fundamental to GA4 and makes things a lot easier. Secondly, data insights. There is much more built-in machine learning capabilities. You have access to predictive audiences and insights, which can be automated insights based on what Google curates for you. And then you can have a separate set of custom insights that is very custom to your business. And lastly, from a last mile standpoint, you can activate your data better. So there are use cases such as advanced analytics via GCP, or you could activate your first party data with Google Ads and GMP. So these are definitely some of the use cases that makes the GA4 much more, I would say, activation friendly or more data driven and more reliable. Let's look at the event data model in GA4. So there has been a significant shift from a sessions data model to an event-based data model. Earlier with Universal Analytics, you used to have a separate type of hit or a server call for page views, and then events used to be separate. In GA4, everything is an event. Any interaction, including a page view, is an event. You associate these events with the user parameters. So that's how these tie together. If there are certain attributes about a user, which do not change very frequently over time, right? For example, whether a customer is using a certain language preference is not going to change every day. Those are user parameters that you attribute to the user. These are also called user properties. And then the events, there are different sets of events. Some of the events get captured by default automatically once you enable GA4. For others, such as the enhanced measurement events, there is just a toggle that you need to turn on, and then it starts collecting some of the events such as site search, scroll, video start, etc. And then for the other events, you need to implement them specifically with some code or data layer pushes. Similar to how you used to deploy custom events in Universal Analytics. So these are just some different types of events. How events will also have certain parameters associated with it. So any event that you send is no longer limited to like 3 attributes about that event, which used to be category, action, label. Now you can attach an event to multiple parameters, and those parameters can be reused across multiple events as well. So any data point can be considered as a parameter and can be attached to multiple events. So it's not a rigid structure anymore. It's much more flexible in that way. Let's understand events and parameters a bit more. No longer using the category, action, label framework in Universal Analytics. So you have an event with parameters. A single event can have up to 25 parameters associated with that event in order to provide more context about that event. So if you looked at the Universal Analytics, if you have worked on Universal Analytics extensively before, earlier you would have certain limitations in terms of when you look at an event and that event's category action label, it's very much related to what that event is. And it's not usually following the same structure across events. It's no longer the case. So you now have more flexibility. So some examples for GA4 events are: consider a form submission on your website. You could associate it with multiple set of parameters, the ones that make more sense. For example, user ID, category, or even a country, right? It's very flexible. You could associate it with any of those parameters, whichever matters for you to report on. Here are some example events. I've grouped them into two buckets. The first bucket here is the automatically collected events. These, the first three over there, like first visit or session start or page view, these events start collecting data the moment you enable GA4, and the data stream in GA4 starts collecting data. And then you have the enhanced measurement events, which can be enabled by a toggle in the data stream settings, which I will show you in just a moment. These include events such as file downloads, user engagement, which is a new type of event category in itself. Like you could have created user engagement earlier in Universal Analytics too, but it's not. It's now sort of like a default type of event. And it's also very fundamental to GA4. We will understand more about what engagement from a GA4 point of view means. And then clicks, search results, video interactions, these can all be like out of the box with just the click of a button. The e-commerce events, or any other custom events for that matter, there are lists of recommended events from Google. And then there are also, for the most common events such as add to cart, checkout, viewing promotion, viewing the cart, etc. For those, there is already technical specifications available and extensive documentation available from Google, which you can just refer to and then use that for building your event structure and also the product arrays and things like that. Let's now look at conversions. So events can be anything, any interaction on the site, including page view, can be events. But conversions are more of the events that really matter to you. In Universal Analytics, you used to have goals. Goals could be configured to capture data. For example, if somebody's submitting a form and that form submission is considered to be of significant business importance, you could consider that form submission as a goal. And that goal would be reported on separately in Universal Analytics. But you had a higher limit of like 20 goals. And if there are the same events happening multiple times in a session, that would get deduplicated in goals. In GA4, you no longer have goals and you no longer have views. You have conversion events, which means that any event that you use in GA4, again, with the enablement of a toggle button, can be considered as a conversion event. So there are a few ways in which you could define a conversion in GA4. One, you could just enable the toggle for an already tracked event and then mark it as a conversion. And then secondly, if there's already an event being tracked and there are certain parameters that you want to associate with it and then call it a conversion event, you can do that as well. So at this point, I'll take a small break. Let's switch over to the GA4 interface and look at some of the things we talked through. So I'll be using the Google demo account or the flooded property for this demo purposes. As you can see, I'm in the admin panel here. And most of the admin section is very similar to the Universal Analytics. The only major gap you will see, or the miss you will see here, is that it no longer has views. It's not really a miss, but it's more of how the account hierarchy or the asset hierarchy has changed in GA4. You no longer have views, but you have something known as sub-properties. So that's just a quick call out about how within GA4 you can have multiple sub-properties residing under a property. So if I go to data streams, I can see that this is where I can bring in data from not just my website, but also from my Android or iOS apps as well. all of these data can be put together and then can be sourced into a single property where you can then report on a cross device and cross platform sort of customer journey as well. If I go into one of the data streams here, this is the measurement ID here, which is the counterpart of what was your Universal Analytics property ID, and which you will be using to tag the pages. You also have events right below this. For example, enhanced measurements is the toggle that's turned on here. I do not have edit access to this property, so I may not be able to edit this. But you can see that once enhanced measurement is turned on, you have all of these events that are getting captured by default. So that's how enhanced measurement works. If you want to configure events from the UI, such as conversion events, you can navigate to the configure section in here, and it gives you a couple of options. Firstly, the events list here, where you can see all the events that are captured along with some metrics. And then you can also create events. Even conversion events can be created from this area by just creating an event from an existing one that is being collected via the site being tagged, etc. And then you could just modify one of the existing events to repurpose it as a conversion. Let me give you an example to help understand this use case better. If you want to consider a specific page being viewed as a conversion, you could create an event based off of the existing page view event and then add a condition for that specific page, then making it a conversion event. Let me now go to the conversions tab here, and this is where you could enable the toggle for making any of the existing event as a conversion event. You will also see some stats in terms of what has been the conversions and what has been the percentage changes for those conversions in this reporting. It's not really the reporting section, but these are just some high-level stats that are available. More event reporting can be accessed within the reports pane. So that's an overview about different types of events, where you can access the event configuration settings, and also about conversions. We already talked about this and marking existing events as conversion using the configure section in GA4. Let's now look at the dimensions and metrics and see if anything significantly changes in GA4 from that regard. These are some of like the standard or out of the box metrics and dimensions. Most of these continue to persist, but then there are certain differences in their definitions, which we will talk about a bit more. But you can also define custom dimensions and metrics, which are more friendly with your business, which are more catered to your specific custom data measurement needs. This is very similar to the concept of how metrics and dimensions were defined in Universal Analytics as well. So nothing to call out in this regard. You have, very similar to Universal Analytics, a way to have primary and secondary dimensions. So primary dimension in a report is the default dimension that you see in the report. And then the secondary dimension is what you want to add as sort of like a drill down to break the data down by a secondary data category, then to see more custom insights. So I'm going to, again, going back to the interface, looking at how you can add primary or secondary dimensions in a report. So I have one of the common reports. Earlier, it used to be the all pages report in Universal Analytics. Under engagement, I have the pages and screens report here. And what I can do is see that there is the primary dimension here, which can be changed using this drop down here. So basically within one of the report categories, you have multiple selections that you can do to change the primary dimension. Just because I am finding it difficult to like scroll through the different metrics, I could also sort of minimize this tab using this button and just give more space. I could also add a secondary dimension. So for example, with this primary dimension of page title, I want to see maybe a device category, for example. I could just add that. And that comes up is as my second column. This is again very similar to how you saw or added the device category or the secondary dimension in universal analytics as well. But what's the key difference in GA4 reports? You have the ability to add comparisons. So you could add different other filters or different other dimension conditions to then compare one segment versus another. If you have edit access to the property, you will also see an edit report button, which we will show you in the later half. But you also have options to like edit the comparisons. You can edit how these visuals look. You can change whether to show this bar chart or not. It's no longer very, rigid like the UA reports. You can also change like the default dimension to show in this report, etc. Since I do not have edit access, I may not be able to demo that, but you will usually see an edit icon over here once if you have edit access, and then you can change the whole default layout of this entire section. So that's an overview of primary and secondary dimensions and how you can use that to drill down your reports, etc. You can also define custom dimensions or custom metrics according to what makes more business sense for you. So just a very important note, and some folks have even found this out the hard way. If you're setting up an event and it has certain parameters, and if you want to report on those parameters, maybe using Explore reports or in some of the standard reports, you need to define those as custom dimensions. So any parameter that is to be used in a reporting, used to be in a report, then it needs to be defined specifically as a custom dimension or a custom metrics are different, but as a custom dimension. So that's a very important call out. If you are seeing an event parameter, you're already capturing data for an event parameter, but it's not coming through in your reports, you may have to create a custom dimension for it. So that's just a call out. Let's look at where you can create custom dimensions and metrics. So again, all of these are in the configure section. This is a new section where you can define certain items such as custom dimensions metrics under custom definitions here. You can see there are many already that are defined. And then you can also define audiences. We already looked at events and conversions as well. The debug view here is a view where you can troubleshoot real time. If there is an event that is set up and you want to sort of view that event in real time, see what data points get captured along with it, you can use debug view. In order to send data to debug view, you need to have a debug mode enabled, which can be done with an extension such as GA debugger extension. Or you could use GTM preview mode or Google Tag Manager preview mode to send data to the debug view so that you can see the events live. We'll not dive any deeper into that, but that's a quick overview of the configure section where you can define custom definitions such as dimensions, metrics, audiences, and events. This, I think, is one of the crucial sections, and understanding this is very key to understanding what's new with GA4, especially when you are relying on some of the web KPIs in Universal Analytics as your key business KPIs. Understanding what are the differences between some of the earlier available metrics versus how they are different in GA4. So let's go to that section. So firstly, users by default used to be total users in Universal Analytics, but in GA4, these refer to active users, which are more of engaged users and not just all the users. And what do you mean by engaged users? The engagement measurement criteria is, I'll talk about that a bit more when we go through engagement rate. But in a gist, GA4 is giving you a more sort of concise or a deduplicated number to look at just the users that are active on your site and not sort of, keeping a tab open in the background and not spending so much time on the tab. So active users might also be users who keep coming back to the site at certain intervals. You also still have access to total users, but that needs to be specifically mentioned as total users when pulling that metric in Explore reports. By default, if you see users anywhere, that's usually active users. Page views is just the number of pages viewed, right? This is one of the metrics that is expected to closely match in UA and GA4. Still, you will see some differences, probably 5 to 10% delta, but very expected to very closely match because the definitions are very similar. However, in GA4, note that if you have apps, then the screen views will also get combined along with the page views from a website. Again, same logic, if you refresh a page, multiple page views are counted in both Universal Analytics and GA4. So in that regard, nothing's changing there. Sessions with Universal Analytics, if you remember the definition, it indicates active engagement on the site. So if somebody is on a site, on a page, and they did not involve in any activity for 30 minutes, the session stops. And then if they come back to the page, then another session starts, right? And then it also resets at midnight. So if they go past 12 a.m. even on an active session, then it just starts a new session. That's how Universal Analytics used to work. And any new campaign parameters, such as UTM parameters within the same session, can trigger a new session, right? So for example, that's one of the reasons it is not recommended to tag with UTM parameters on any internal links, because if you click on internal links that have different UTM parameters, then it triggers a new session and the whole attribution to the channel will also get changed. With GA4, some major updates, it doesn't reset at midnight, or it doesn't change session with a resetting of campaign parameters. You also have something known as a session ID, which is measured within like a session start event. Purchases, again, close definitions, but there are still some differences. Google uses JavaScript to collect the purchase data from products array, but it's not using JavaScript in GA4. It's collected from the items array. So one notable name change here is that earlier, what used to be called as product is now being referred to as item in GA4. So you will see any item parameters are product related parameters. Some more metrics here. So goals used to exist in Universal Analytics. There are no longer goals, but instead you have conversion events. Goal completions would be considered only once per session, but you don't have that with conversions. Every time a conversion happens, even if the same form gets submitted twice during a session, it will get counted every time it happens. Engaged sessions did not exist in Universal Analytics, but they do exist in GA4. So these are the criteria, such as if you have at least 2 page views, right? Or greater than or equal to 10 seconds a time spent on a page, or 1 conversion event. If you have defined conversion event according to some of your criteria, it could even be scroll. Now, this is a game changer because earlier with Universal Analytics, if you had a high bounce rate for a page, it's not necessarily bad. For example, for a Wikipedia page, it's expected to have high bounce rate because people came in, looked at the first page, went through the content and they left. And that's not a bad sign to have a high bounce rate on that page. It's no longer rigid in terms of that definition in GA4. So you have people spending more time on a page is also considered as an engaged session. You could also define a certain conversion event in such a way that makes an non-engaged session into an engaged session. So you have more control over how you want to define something as an engaged session. Similarly, engagement rate, it's basically the ratio of engaged sessions to all the total number of sessions. Bounce rate is the inverse of engaged sessions. So it's the percentage of non-engaged sessions, and usually less than 10 seconds duration, which is very different to how bounce rate was earlier with universal analytics. So usually bounces are 0-second duration because there would be a starting timestamp, but there wouldn't be like an end timestamp because people left from the website. So those are some of the metric definitions and comparisons, how they stand in UA versus GA4. Let's now look at some reporting aspects or reporting components within GA4. Reporting is much more flexible. You have a lot of ability to customize. Earlier, I mentioned about having that edit icon within your primary or standard reports where you can rearrange how the different graphs or tiles or the tables look. You could also customize the navigation pane on the left side to include certain specific types of reports, of your choice. And that's an example here. These are called collections in GA4. And if you have edit access to a property, you will see a section such as library, where you will be able to go in and then edit the navigation tab, make changes that will reflect across the whole property for any users. Again, you need edit access for making those changes. The user interface has some changes. These are the different tabs that are available. Home is very similar to home on Universal Analytics, a snapshot of reports, but the type of reports that you see are different. Basic overview graphs. If you have recently viewed any sections or reports, those are also available in the home tab. Let's take a quick look at the home tab in this case. So this is our home tab. And you can see that it has some real-time snapshots as well, some key metrics, acquisition, engagement, and also monetization metrics. So that's another sort of shift if you look at Universal Analytics versus GA4. Originally, you had acquisition behavior and conversion, but now it's more, it's a different terminology. It's acquisition, engagement, and monetization. And you also have the insights section and some other sort of tabs. This is the report snapshot. Let me go back to home. So it has the recently viewed section. So all of these were options or sections that I went into, so I could just navigate to the recently viewed sections. And then there is the Insights tab. Note that for Insights tab, usually it needs to have some amount of data collected as a threshold in order to show you relevant insights. Then you have the report section, which is where all the reports lie, the ones that we looked at. The Explore reporting is, we will dive into that a bit more. It's basically all of those reports, the drag and drop interface that you can use to craft your own reports, choose the metrics and dimensions of your choice, and do a data exploration. The advertising section has attribution modeling reports. If you want to compare different attribution models, etc., that's where you would go to. We already looked at configure and admin for some of the settings. These are the standard reports. You might already be familiar. I already mentioned the name changes from behavior to engagement and conversion to monetization. Retention is a very important section as well. You can look at reports such as lifetime value, doing cohort analysis to look at how different groups of users behaved over time, how they're responding to campaigns, etc. And then you have the new versus returning users, etc. in that section. Demographics and technology are also probably familiar to you. All the demographic or country, city, that type of reports, plus then browser device reports are available under technology. This is the section I was talking about earlier. So if you have edit access, you will see the edit icon. And some of the changes that you can do within existing reports are you could customize the order and visibility of which dimensions and metrics to be shown in a standard report. You have more control over that. You could also choose which attribution model the report should be using, which comparisons needs to be applied, and also sort of the order in which the widgets appear. This is the section I refer to when wherein you can change the navigation section on the left and have custom sort of reports grouped into like folders. GA4 comes with more analytics intelligence and machine learning integration. So the insights that you get can be either automated insights, default insights that Google provides to you. And you could also set up certain thresholds to look at custom insights. So if there is a certain benchmark that you want to introduce, you could bring that in by adding certain thresholds and then adding custom insights based on rules that you set. Anomaly detection and contribution analysis are for identifying any abnormal spikes or trends, and then trying to understand what could be the reason that led to that certain anomaly. So contribution analysis looks at different audiences or different groups of users or different values of different dimensions to then identify a certain group of users that may have contributed to a certain anomaly. You have on-demand insights available. The search bar in GA4 is much more insightful. You get different types of listings in the search results, such as a certain account or property configuration, help articles, different reports available within GA4, or you could even ask a natural language question. So just to look at the search window here, if I click into the search bar, I get a lot of these report suggestions or the sections in GA4 which I recently navigated, and then I could also ask natural language questions, such as one that I just picked randomly, right? So it gives me certain insights. So how many users from organic search in last 30 days? It gives me an insight here. You could also look at other sort of suggested questions. So this is the intelligence section where some of the commonly asked questions and the reports that you could look at are navigatable easily from here. You also have the option to share these insights with a larger group if you would like to do that. With GA4, we talked about certain regulations, privacy concerns that are coming up in different parts of the globe. So you have more regional controls or more granular controls. If you want to enable, for example, Google signals in certain regions, but disable that in other regions, you could do that. By the way, Google Signals is a way in which you could capture data from signed in users to Google who have ads personalization turned on. So if a user has opted in for ads personalization in their Google account settings, then Google uses their Google sign-in information, right? Not the sign-in on your website, the Google sign-in information to then associate and identify the user across devices. So if a user is signed into Google on their laptop and their mobile, then that information with their consent can be used to map the same users cross device. So that's basically Google device that enables a lot of advertising features as well. Cross device identification can also be controlled across certain geographies. So for example, due to GDPR, you do not want to enable that in European markets. You could toggle it off in those certain countries. So that gives you more regional privacy controls. Again, a quick peek into what this setting looks like. So in admin, under data settings, data collection, this is where you have signals enablement, or you could also look at location and device data collection. So if you go into settings here, you have the option to turn it on or off for different individual countries. Just a couple of other options. Data retention settings can be managed in here. If you have any filters, that can also be added in here. There are usually two types of filters, one for developer traffic and the other for, I think, for testing. I do not recall exactly the second one. So a couple of filters. One good thing to note is that the filters available in Universal Analytics are not exactly the same that are available in GA4. So some of these features might change with future rollouts, but currently you can either remove internal traffic or other sort of, available filters that are out there. Most of the other settings, such as like product integrations, are very similar. One quick thing to note, campaign manager integration is not there yet, but it will be, it is part of the roadmap and should come up as well. Let's now look at the last section for this webinar, which is the exploration reports, the drag and drop reporting interface in GA4. So Explore is available here. This is one thing that everybody definitely missed with Universal Analytics, right? We had custom reports, but there were certain limitations in custom reports, and it wasn't as easy to put together and edit reports. But with GA4, you have some of these custom templates that are available. For example, free form tables or funnel reports, path exploration, segment overlap, and a couple more, user lifetime and cohort. We'll look into each of these, but for the purposes of the demo, we will look at free form and funnel exploration reports. I already have a couple of reports open here. So there's the free form report. So you can see there are, this is the section where the different variables lie, the dimensions, metrics, and you can also bring in user segments. So there are 6 dimensions already over here, but if you want to import any more dimensions, you can click into the plus icon and then search for a certain dimension to bring it in. For example, if I want to bring in browser version, I can import browser version, and then that now becomes available for bringing into my reports. So you can see this is currently a flat table with columns and rows, and then certain metrics also available here. In this case, the metric is active users, and that is available under values. Instead of active users, if you would like to see transactions instead, you could replace active users with transactions. In this case, you can see there hasn't been many transactions, so that may not be a relevant data point. So I'm going to replace it again with active users. Multiple other customizations available. Device category is currently in here. If I don't want to see that matrix format anymore, I want to see just the country and then the users, then I could just remove it. So this is basically a drag and drop sort of setup. You could also apply segments. For example, if I want to look at only direct traffic, I could drag and drop that segments into the segment section, and then the segment would get applied on my report. And you can see that this is getting added as a comparison against the total. The other type of exploration report we can look at today is the funnel report. And you can see there is, this is basically the checkout funnel. So if I want to see this more clearly, I could minimize some of these tabs, which can be expanded by just clicking on these tabs. And you can see this is basically a funnel report that, you just have to use the template. You will get some default funnels. And then you can see the drop-offs from a first open up till the purchase. You also have certain comparisons at the bottom. The completion rate, abandonments, and abandonment rate is split out as different metrics here. And the steps are customizable, as you can see here. So these steps have been defined here, but you can click into it, edit, and add, like how you can create like segments. You can add different funnel steps. These are all custom funnels and not necessarily funnels that have been defined as a as a robust or sort of like a rigid structure in universal analytics where a funnel had to be built in a certain way. So those are a couple of reporting examples. Let's look at the other types. So this is the overall user interface where you can do a lot of drag and drop. Advanced analytics techniques can be applied. Even predictive metrics can be used in your reports. From the reports, you can also create segments from the analysis. So for example, if I wanted to create a segment from this certain selection, I could just right click and create a segment. And I could also include or exclude, basically applying that selection as a filter in order to see certain, drill down further into certain subsets of data. Freeform tables, we already looked at these. You can have different chart types as well. So either tables or graph format. Multiple metrics can be compared side by side. Segments can be created from that data if needed. Funnel exploration can be open funnel or a closed funnel. A closed funnel is where a user would have to follow a certain steps in that certain order in order to be part of that funnel. An open funnel is where somebody could just come in to like directly into step 2, and then they could be considered as part of the funnel. So in the funnel reporting, you have the option to make it either an open or closed funnel over here. You have the path exploration report. If you remember the behavior flow report in Universal Analytics, it's very similar. You can define certain starting points and how what are the different sequence of events or even pages that certain users navigated through to look at the ones that have more volume. Segment comparison or a segment overlap can be used to get, for example, a Venn diagram like this, which gives you what is the overlap of users belonging to different segments. User lifetime report is considered one of the more valuable additions. Looking at different channels, you could look at, you could have GA calculate the lifetime value and gives you more insights about which channels or sources or mediums drove users with the highest lifetime value, which is obviously calculated over time and sort of is also sort of a predictive metric to tell you how valuable a user can be with more time. Cohort explorations can be used to look at groups or segments of users that behave and respond to your campaigns or tactics with time. So you could have a time access to it and then measure whether users are engaging a lot in the first few months and look at certain groups and then understand which groups or which combinations really work out well. So that's a high-level overview of the GA4 user interface. Intentionally stopped this 10 minutes before the end time, so we have sufficient time to also go through questions. But as the next steps, what could you be thinking of doing? If you haven't already started GA4 migration, it's probably, if this was 3 months back, we would say it's a good time to start. But then now, with most of our clients, we are at a point where it's now or never sort of thing, because we have to also start building historical data with GA4 so that next year, once US stops collecting data, then you have GA4 already set up and also has significant historical information to process, maybe year-over-year comparisons. So it would be probably high time to start if you want to start migration to GA4. You can also reach out to InfoTrust if you want to get prepared for the GA4 migration and if you haven't started getting on that path yet. With that, I will now look at questions. So does a data stream equal to a GA4 subproperty? Not exactly. Data streams can be for can be for different sites as well. But ideal use case of data streams would be setting up a stream for website, setting up a stream for Android app, and then one for iOS app. You can also have multiple streams created under a property, but Google has also mentioned that the more streams you add, it is going to affect performance as well. So it's not really recommended to have multiple streams unless they are like coming from apps and web, right? So it's a way to bring in data from multiple platforms such as app and web into like a singular property. Whereas sub property is different. It's a way to have a certain cut of data, right? Similar to how you had views with universal analytics. But one call out about sub property is that for every sub property you create, the billable rate goes up, right? For example, with every event collected in a sub property, you have to there's a more it adds to the hit count, and then I think it's 1.5x per event that the rates at which you get more, you'll get charged more for using sub property. So you might want to consider using sub properties from a cost perspective as well, to use it only if required and if it makes a business justification to use it. Is there a limitation on how many custom goals you can have? So Jeff, about your question on custom goals. So just to be clear on terminology, we no longer have goals, we have conversions. About conversions, I'm not aware of a limit. Maybe there is, but you do not have something like a 20 limit for goals, right? I can't recall the limit off the top of my head. Maybe I can get back to you on that. But it's definitely at least 20 to 30 conversions. There should not be any challenges there. I think there is more that you can have. Will it be a 5-step funnel in GA4? So Rishabh, to answer your question about funnels, you looked at how you have custom funnel capability in GA4 in Explore reports as well, right? So it's no longer bound by how many steps in your checkout process you can have. In Universal Analytics as well, you could build custom funnels, but there were certain limitations there. But now you're able to, address these challenges a bit more by creating more custom and meaningful funnels. By the way, we have a poll. So if you haven't taken part in that poll, please do address or share your answers in that poll. Let's see here. So how can we have similar custom reports in GUA in GA4, like some recommendations? So good question, Louis. If you already have certain custom reports that you're relying in Universal Analytics, what I would say is that it is usually much more easy to replicate those. But if there are certain metrics that are like different in Universal Analytics versus GA4, it's going to be slightly tricky. But from a use case standpoint, you are able to recreate some of those reports in GA4. It should not be a problem. You should be able to do that with Explore reports. However, it also depends on how much of that data has already been collected in GA4. So if there are custom events that are capturing data for the custom report in Universal Analytics, you will need to map those into GA4 and then create those in GA4, right? Obviously, this is a very high level answer. May not directly address your use case, but yeah, if you have specific use cases, would be very happy to look at that as well, considering that we work together, so we could definitely have follow-up conversations as well. So when will the campaign manager integration be in GA4? Good question. That's on the roadmap, as we know, and believe, it should be here either this quarter or next quarter, but we cannot definitely commit that, I think, because that's more on Google's side to sort of share that update. So we are also looking forward to some of those integrations or some of the features that we are looking forward to. For example, the custom channel definitions or product scoped custom dimensions. These are some of the features that we are definitely looking forward to have, but these are all on the roadmap. We do not know a definite date when these will be ready. Are the funnel reports based on users, sessions, or hits or events, right? So we already mentioned that the fundamental data point or data collection model is user or event based. So it depends on which sort of metrics you use. So let's look at this funnel report that we looked at just a while ago. In this case, you can see that it is based on like the number of users is present here, right? So that's at a user level, that's aggregated at a user level. So the associated metrics would also be associated at the user level. So question from Ethel, my website is not an e-commerce website. The conversion is defined as a request for quote and contact us. So when it comes to monetization, what information will be generated? Right. Good question, Ethel. If your website is not an e-commerce website, which is very similar to a lot of websites that I work on day in, day out, we work on a lot of CPG websites that do not have an e-commerce component to it. Technically, there wouldn't be any revenue values, would be zero. But you can have, for example, if there is an event such as request for quote or contact us, that is a very important event for you. You can mark that as a conversion event. So you will not see any revenue values for that. But if you want to associate any, like for example, contact us via phone has more value than contact us via email, then you can assign certain value to those events. Very similar to how you would assign event value in Universal Analytics. You could have a parameter that could capture the value of it. But that's the best you can do to sort of like quantify or, put a number to a conversion. Other than that, if there's no e-commerce, then the monetization reports may not be much relevant for you. You may just look at the conversion reports. So just looking at the next question, is there a way to do, okay, there is a way to do annotations. This is very helpful. I haven't seen an annotation feature so far in GA4, but maybe it might come. As of now, I don't think that is, it's probably in the roadmap somewhere, but we are not aware of when this will be live. So looking at the last question here, is there a limit to the number of rows of data returned in the explorations tool? Good question. So if you are seeing some, for example, in some of the reports, if you are seeing just a set of, just a set of values, then that may be expanded. You might be able to see more rows. So one way to see more number of rows is this. But then if you want to look at data that has so much of possible values, like it's called cardinality in technical terms. If a certain dimension has more than 500 values, 500 unique values being captured in a day, then that is that can cause trouble and cause not set values to appear in your reports. The best recommendation is try to avoid those values with high cardinality at this point. Google is also sort of working on addressing that better. And lastly, you could also schedule, set up exports to BigQuery and that sort of thing to work around and getting a raw data view to look at more values. I hope that addresses your question. So with that, I believe I've addressed all the questions in Q&A. Yeah. Let me check if there are any other questions in chat. So comparisons are different from segments. Segments is where you create a group based on a condition. Comparisons is slightly different in a sense that you can see items like side by side. And it's a way of like comparing two different types of like attributes side by side, etc. Okay. Rishabh, all reports most reports by default will show active users, but you could see other user metrics also in Explore if you choose total users. Jeff, for your question, you do not need to create separate property for Android and iOS. You can set it up within the same property using a different data stream. Okay. In exploration section, community shared templates, again, that needs to come up, I think, Tony. So may not be available right now. You may be able to leverage some of the reports created by other users in the same property. So is it possible to export or get the exploration reports to reflect the custom tags created using GTM? Good question, Mitch. I think so. If there are any custom data that has been captured using GTM tagging, then you can bring that into exploration reports, and you could definitely also share and export that data from exploration reports. I know we are over time, so we will stop or end this webinar now. But thank you all for engaging and asking those really insightful questions. Hope you were able to get some solid takeaways from here. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.